everyone, this is Liz Holson from the USPA Polo Development LLC, and I'm very excited to have an opportunity to present this topic of body scoring your polo pony to you. As a result of many long conversations with the rest of the polo development team and my USPA clinicians, it's become apparent that the topic of assessing weight of our polo ponies is of the utmost importance. Through all of our travels and numerous club visits, we've seen that there's a huge gap in knowledge among polo players when it comes to understanding and assessing the weight of our equine partners. As a result of that conversation, we've done a handful of presentations on this very subject at various clinics and events, but we've realized that we need to be more proactive in our education. Therefore, we've put together this presentation, and we also have a handout that you can find on the USPA website for anyone who's interested in having a fill-in-the-blank resource to go along with this. So without any further ado, I'm going to get started. You don't need me to tell you that our polo ponies are incredible athletes. They're our partners in the game, and we go through great lengths and costs to ensure that they're properly fit and nourished for all the demands we place on them over the course of the game. But how do we tell if all of our efforts are effective? We have a number of qualitative estimates of our efforts, and we know that purely going by weight would be ineffective because each horse is different, and there's no way your 16-year-old Argentine gelding should weigh the same amount as your 6-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred. Obtaining a body condition score for each of your horses will help you objectively rank their weight and the effectiveness of your program. It will also give you tools to communicate effectively across the equine community. Body condition scoring, or BCS, uses a scale from 1, emaciated, to 9, obese, and is used across all equestrian disciplines to evaluate a horse's weight and overall condition. Additionally, it's also a useful tool for evaluating your horse's response to your feeding program and your exercise program. By using the body condition scoring model, over time, it can help you track and monitor your horse, and you can gain a tremendous amount of insight about your program and how it affects your horses. To effectively determine your horse's BCS, you must firmly apply pressure to your horse, using your hands to touch various parts of their body. As you feel your horse, you'll find fleshy tissue or fat stores along key body parts. It's important to note, and it may be obvious for some more experienced horse people out there, but many of our horses are sensitive in many of these areas, so you always need to put your safety first and be aware of your horse's demeanor and reactions when standing in the kick zone. When body condition scoring your horse, you'll want to make sure to feel these 6 key body parts, remembering that you're looking to feel fat stores or lack thereof in the following places. You want to be looking at their neck, their shoulder, their withers, ribs, loin, and tail head to see if you can feel any of this fat. And as you're feeling these various parts, you're looking for the tissue to give and compress slightly, just like a sponge would. At this point in this presentation, I need to let you all know that it's unbelievably hard to give your horse a body condition score from a photo. Photos can be too light, too dark, taken from a bad angle, and all of those factors can be misleading when obtaining and determining a BCS. But because this is a webinar, and I can't do this with you all in person, we have some photos of horses that I've personally had the chance to touch and obtain their body condition score. Now that we know which areas we're looking at, we need to obtain the body score and review what the standard is. We've all looked at a horse before and we've said, oh my God, he's so skinny. Or, oh my God, that pony is so fat right now. But by using the body condition score, we're all able to objectively rank your horse's weight. Here, we have the body condition score scale. As I said earlier, a horse with a body condition score of 1 is considered emaciated, and the horse with a body condition score of 9 is considered obese. But we really need to talk about the meat of this scale, which is what falls in between. A horse with a body condition score of 5 is considered ideal for a playing polo pony. That would be this 5 on top of the line right here. 4 and 6 are also acceptable scores. But I want to start with the 5, and here you see that it's neither too fat nor too thin. There are no ribs that would be visible on the horse's barrel, and when you feel them, you're going to have to swish around just a little bit to feel them underneath the fat cover. The vertebrae would be level with the back, and you can see clearly that the neck, the shoulder, and the withers all kind of blend together in a very smooth feeling. The tail head, this area right up here, is going to be spongy to the touch. Now, if we translate this to a photo of a horse with a body condition score of 5, you can see some of these markers. You see that the neck, the shoulder, and the withers all blend very smoothly together. And when you're feeling this horse in person, you'll just have to squish around on the ribs to feel them underneath. If we move on and look at the horse with a body condition score of 4, you'll see that one of the biggest differences between the horse with a BCS of 4 and a BCS of 5 is going to be this just inherent visibility of the ribs. They're buried by only a very slight fat cover, but they will be clearly visible to your naked eye without squishing around for them with your fingers at all. You'll also be able to see that the neck, the shoulder, and the withers are just slightly leaner than the 5, but they're by no means considered thin. You'll also see the vertebrae raised just slightly above the rest of the level of the back. Moving now to the photo of a 4, you will be able to see the ribs just slightly along the barrel. You won't have to squish around for them much at all with your fingers. They'll be very visible and apparent. The polo ponies that score pretty at the 4, some of them play very well for polo. And it's very important for you as the owner, the rider, or the groom to balance this horse's nutritional needs with those of the conditioning, because that is very important to maintain the critical systems such as circulatory, respiratory, musculoskeletal, and so on. If you ask a horse to perform at this body condition score of 4 for a long period of time, especially without balancing those nutritional needs with the needs of conditioning, the strain on those systems is exacerbated, and the BCS can worsen, progressing to a 3 or even worse, causing long-term lasting damage to your horse's body. Now, returning to our overview, I want to talk about a horse with a BCS of 6. Horses at BCS of 6 are considered plump. They're carrying slightly more fat stores on the ribs and the tail head, and they have that spongy feeling just slightly bit more than the horse with the BCS of 5. The back is going to be well-rounded, and you're going to notice fat deposits on the neck, the shoulders, and the withers have started to form. Moving into this photo of a horse with a BCS of 6, you see that this horse has an overall feeling of plumpness. You can see the fat stores just showing on the shoulder, the neck, and the withers. It's also really important with the 6 to note that these horses do play well at 6. Many, many horses play well at a BCS of 6. And especially if you're entering into a strenuous season, these extra fat stores can be very favorable as you're going through a long season. These stored fats, when broken down, create energy that can be used in aerobic exercise, such as we do in polo. Now that we've covered this ideal range, we need to talk about what happens when you have horses that are both too light and too heavy. If we start at horses that are at a BCS of 3, you'll see that these horses, both shown in the 2 circles at the bottom of your screen, have very little fat stored. At this point, they have to break down muscles in order to access stored protein that's then converted into usable energy in order to perform as they're asked. Here, if we zoom in a little closer, we have these 2 horses that are both 3s on the body condition score. I'd like to spend a little bit of extra time talking about horses at the score, because many times we see horses playing either in person or in photos, and we see some ribs, which leads us to believe that's a fit horse. And that can be true. However, photos are misleading, as are horses running down the field. You can't judge a horse from a one-off photo, and you really need to have this opportunity to put your hands on this horse to accurately judge their BCS. And that's where a lot of confusion arises. But when you have a horse that's showing ribs and their tail head and their neck and shoulder and withers starts to look like this, they're a BCS of 3, and that will be considered too thin for polo. Here you can see this horse's neck is much thinner than our horse with the BCS of 4. There's a very clear delineation between that neck, the shoulder, and the withers. You see many of the horse's ribs, and when you run your hands over the back, you'll feel the horse's individual vertebrae. At this point, you also start to see what's called the Malanito hump by many Argentines, and it is very 100% indicative of the fact that this horse is too skinny and it's not getting the proper nourishment and exercise and feed it needs. Here's another horse with a BCS of 3. Now, it's important to note with this horse, because it's very well muscled in this photo, that this horse was taken on the photo of this horse was taken on the day it was turned out for some R&R. This is a horse that plays best at a BCS of 4, but because she was being played in 2 leagues and heavily used, the balance of nutrition to work needed to maintain her at that BCS was off. And the protein that was used from the stored muscles changed that BCS to a 3. You can see that this horse has considerable muscle built up on its shoulders and hind end, but it's important to note that those muscles are so visible and apparent because all of the fat stores have been used, and there are no more fat stores for this horse to access when we're asking it to perform at such high levels as we do in polo. If you have a horse with a body condition score of 3, it needs to come out of work for some serious rest. Prolonging the amount of time spent at this BCS, will cause excessive strain to the body and can lead to permanent problems. It's important to remember that horses at a BCS of 4 always start to break down that muscle to access the protein to use as energy sources. But at the BCS of 3, the process has already been started, and they're going to start to move on and start breaking down more critical muscles over time. Eventually, they'll break down the heart muscle. And we really need to avoid that for very obvious reasons, such as heart failure and circulatory distress. We'll talk in just a couple of minutes about further interventions and how to reevaluate your feeding programs. So the takeaway from this slide here is that a horse with a body condition score of 3 really should come out of work. Talking about the other end of the body condition score scale, we want our horses to put on weight, especially when they're turned out, and at the beginning of the season, having a BCS of 7 would not be a critically limiting factor by any means. It's important to note with these horses, though, that you'll have to do some long, slow distance work, aka a lot of walking, in order to progress your horse to the point it needs to start playing. If we take a minute to look at this upper end of the scale, you'll see that this horse is significantly more fleshy than the horse at the BCS of 6. If you look at this horse from the hind end, you'll see that there's a crease down the length of the spine. You'll see it appears right here, right above the tail head. And you'll see more significant fat deposits, especially on the shoulder, the withers, on the neck, the dock, and when you're feeling the ribs, you're really going to have to push a little bit more to feel those ribs. They're almost separated by fat. Horses at a higher BCS, which is anything over 5, are carrying extra weight that will negatively impact their ability to regulate their core temperature, which in turn impacts how long they can perform at optimum levels for. There's been research done to show that the internal limiting factor in all performance is core temperature. So the more weight they carry can add further strains onto their joints, bones, hooves, heart, and lungs. Now that we know how to determine our horse's body condition score and what the ideal range looks like, we need to spend a minute talking about what to do when your horse is too fat or too skinny. At the low end of the BCS, it's important to check your horse's teeth. When properly cared for, the teeth can cause a whole range of problems, from oral ulcers that make it difficult to grind up their food, which causes problems when extracting nutritional value from their feed. You need to pull your horse out of work. You need to focus on rebuilding some of those fat stores before bringing them back into their fitness program. One of the biggest causes of horses with BCS of 3 is overwork, especially when you think about it being imbalanced with their nutritional needs that really haven't been met. Then you'll need to look at your nutrition program and re-examine it. What is your horse eating? Horses need to eat approximately 2% of their body weight a day, which for a 1,000-pound horse is nearly 20 pounds of feed. And I'm not saying 20 pounds of grain here, but I'm talking about 20 pounds of high fiber feed, mostly grass or hay, which would make up the majority of your horse's diet. If you've switched hay recently, you might want to consider getting it tested to see what the nutrient breakdown looks like. You should also double check your feed. Have you changed it recently? Did the company change the formula recently? You need to use the bag tags that are at the bottom of every bag in order to determine the nutritional breakdown of your feed. And when in doubt, use your grain and go get it tested and your hay to determine why your horse has a BCS. To think about your deworming schedule. It might be worth doing it again or having a fecal test done if that's something that's concerning you. And lastly, you should really consult your vet if you have any questions or concerns. They will be one of your greatest resources in helping you help your horses come back to their ideal range. At the other end of the body condition score scale, you'll need to do lots of long, slow distance work to bring this horse back into a fitness program. They will need to walk a lot before singling, stick and balling, and especially before practicing. You should re-examine your feeding program. You might be feeding a high-fat feed, and you might not be needing to feed that, especially if you've gone from having your horse in work to being turned out. Other things that might happen include your grass comes back for the summer, and you might need to invest in a grazing muzzle. Lastly, consult your vet, because sudden changes in BCS without changes to exercise or nutritional programs can be indicative of underlying issues. I don't want to take too much time away from the overall subject of body condition score scale here, but I'd like to review this great breakdown of nutrition and exercise from Shelley Onderdonk, because it plays a very important role in assessing changes in the overall monitoring of BCS. The topics of fitness and nutrition are incredibly important, and we've said them at least 50 times so far on this presentation. And we're going to talk about this just briefly because they're very much standalone topics for another day and another presentation. One of the most important things here is to remember water. Your horse drinks nearly 5 to 10 gallons of water in cool weather each day. And in hot weather, that can double. It's also important to note that 7 gallons of water is required for your horse to process the feed that it's taking in on a daily basis. Another important thing to note is that dehydration can cause a horse to lose 10% of its body weight. So think about that in terms of practicing and playing and taking your horse on long trips, which we all do across the country. Always remember water. So now let's move to this nutritional pyramid. The key to any equine diet is quality roughage, which is going to be known as hay or grass. A horse in moderate work is going to get the majority of nutritional needs from the high-quality fiber-based roughage. And if you look at Shelley's pyramid, you'll see that the bottom is reserved for this roughage. It's low in energy, and for horses in more intense exercise programs like Polo, you'll need to start supplementing it with fats, seen the next level up. The fats are your horse's source of readily available energy. They help your horse work in hot weather, and they generally improve the quality of their coat. The very top of the pyramid is reserved for concentrates, also known as grain. Grain is highest in calories, and it's been balanced scientifically to give your horse additional calories needed, vitamins, and minerals to help your horse perform at optimum levels. Moving on to the exercise pyramid, we've already talked about long, slow distance work, also known as walking, and I just want to touch on it again. This is one of the most important things you can do to help your horse. It builds bone strength and muscles as you increase speed and distance. And over the course of 4 to 6 weeks, you can bring a horse that was turned out back into work. It's really important to note when talking about walking and long, slow distance work that when horses are traveling, they will pick the most energy efficient pace. And when we're focusing on strengthening and conditioning, you need to encourage them to speed up just slightly and work outside their comfort zone to make those physiological improvements. You'll see here with Shelley's pyramid that she recommends a lot of walking, followed by trottering, cantering, and short work. And finally, at the top, we have playing. So now we need to think about considerations for our horses. As we said already, the ideal body condition score is a 5, but that shouldn't be taken as a hard or fast rule. It's not a prescriptive solution for all horses. Some horses play better at a 4, some play better at a 6, but you need to be very conscientious of their needs at both of those BCS. When we go outside the ideal, there are many factors that can contribute to the horse's body condition score or changes in it. One of the first things to think about is age. You'll often find that older horses, especially those in work, score slightly lower than younger horses who may be equally fit. With these older horses, it's even more important to monitor and balance their nutritional needs with their fitness, as they can lose weight quickly, causing detrimental harm to themselves. You want to think about the season that you're going to ask your horse to play in. Starting a difficult season with a little bit of extra weight, somewhere in the range of 50 pounds, will not be detrimental in your horse to the slightest. Those extra fat stores will be beneficial to your mount as soon as the season starts to progress. It's also important to note that when horses are turned out, especially in the cold winter season, it may help your horse to have some extra fat stores to provide that extra insulation from extreme winter weather. Also, for those of you who work your horses in winter, in those cold winter climates, you really need to be sure to monitor their BCS, because now they have a third factor. They have their nutritional needs, their conditioning needs, and then they have the outside factors from the weather. So always pay attention to what's going on around you. Moving on, we have athleticism and aptitude. We know that every horse is different, and we all know that every single horse has some eccentricities, and they're not all going to be the same. So you're not going to go down the string, and you're not going to feed Missy the same thing that you feed Gaucho. They are different horses. Some play better with some extra weight, some play better with less. You'll get to know what's ideal for each horse, and you need to remember to monitor them accordingly. Stress. We all know a horse can, change according to weather, outside factors, all of these various things. And so starting with a horse of a BCS of 5, that can drop very quickly and dramatically, especially during training and competition, due to changes in their routine or to overwork. Overwork is one of the biggest contributors to a decline in body condition score. As you progress through the season, your horse's needs will change, and it's up to you to make sure that the feeding program you have is adequate for the exercise needs that you're asking your horse. It's very important to track your horse's feeding and exercise program in order to monitor and remember all of the factors that are going on. It's also important here to note that trailering can cause your horse to progress from a BCS of 5 to a BCS of 4 and possibly lower, if that's the case and you're going on a very long trip. Moving on, we all know from our own personal experiences that underlying health issues can have a significant impact on weight and conditioning. You should consult your veterinarian if you have a horse with the BCS that's inconsistent with their feeding and exercise program. We mentioned it already, but poor dental care can result in problems, from oral ulcers to improper chewing and digestion of their feed, to on-the-field problems with bitting of your horse. Your horse's dental care is of the utmost importance, and with poor dental care, you could be feeding the best premium hay and grain, but your horse will not have the ability to extract the nutritional benefits from it. Thinking about the horse's coat. A heavy coat can mask your horse's true BCS. Some horses have thicker, heavier coats, especially in the winter months, which is when many horses are turned out, and they can drop weight quickly because of any variety of reasons. With horses that are turned out, always take your time feeling those 6 points before determining a BCS and keep track of how their BCS changes. It's also important here to note blanketing is a very important thing to remember if you have some horses that are turned out. Make sure to pull those blankets off regularly to obtain your horse's body score so you don't have any surprises at the end of the winter season. We've talked about this once or twice already, but I think it's important to talk about tracking your horse's feed and exercise regimens. There are many different apps out there for keeping track of vets and farrier visits, deworming, injuries, feed, and exercise, but honestly, you don't need anything very fancy. This is an old spreadsheet that we have for our Team USPA string. We can zoom in a little bit. Oh. We can zoom in a little bit, and we can see that we're monitoring all of these factors over the course of a week. So at the top, we have the horse's grain and hay, what they get fed in the morning, what they get fed in the evening, do they get any supplements, and we have that broken down at the top. Then when we go to the bottom, we have their exercise program. So you can look at this and see that we have our horses who are not in, some of them are in more serious work than others. And they'll practice, and they'll go on sets, and they'll stick and bow, and all of these things. We also keep track of injuries and other things, like new horses that arrive. And we have a note about exactly the feed that they get at the bottom. When we move over a little bit more, we have this weekly BCS. So we're keeping track of every horse's body condition score throughout the week. And it's important to monitor and change when the horse's body condition score changes. It's also a great tool for a horse that comes in possibly skinny, possibly too heavy. We had one horse, and you can see that she came in with a body condition score of 2. And so it's important to document that. So if you have someone who comes to your barn and they say, "Oh, that mare is very skinny, what are you feeding it? What's the deal?" You can have a record of what that horse came to you like and how you're improving it over time. To recap, we all understand that the ideal range for our polo ponies is 4 to 6. It's up to you as a responsible player to know how your horse plays and know which body condition score is best for your horse. At a body condition score of 4, you're doing a careful balancing act with feed and exercise. Remember that if you don't meet the need that's placed on your horse by exercise with the nutritional stores, this horse is going to start taking proteins from its muscle stores to convert into energy, breaking down the heart and straining the liver over time. Anything under 4 is going to be cause for concern, and when not addressed can result in multiple system failure, resulting in permanent damage. These horses should be pulled out of work if they do not begin to regain fat stores. To recap, the ideal range for polo ponies is between 4 and 6. It's up to you as a responsible player to know your horses and know which body condition score is best for them. At a body condition score of 4, you're doing a careful balancing act with feed and exercise. Remember that if you don't meet the need that's placed on your horse by exercise with the nutritional program you're feeding your horse will start to take proteins from muscle stores to convert into energy, breaking down the heart and straining the liver over time. A horse with a BCS under 4 is always cause for concern, and when it's not addressed, can cause multiple system failure, resulting in permanent damage. These horses should be pulled out of work to regain fat stores and keep them healthy. A BCS over 6 will require you to do lots of long, slow distance work before engaging in more intense exercise programs. These horses have compromised abilities to regulate internal temperature, and with the excess weight, it causes strain to tendons, bones, and hooves over time. We need to look at our horses' nutritional needs. The program we feed our horses should be feeding approximately 20 pounds or 2% of your horse's body weight of fiber-filled roughage each day. Remember to take all of the variables into account: age, teeth, coat, stress, activity, etc., and when obtaining your horse's BCS. And lastly, you really need to remember to consult your vet to diagnose underlying health issues. This presentation was intended to be purely educational, and we did consult with vets. However, each horse is different and requires individualized attention. The body condition score scale is a standard for us to use across the equine industry, and it's an understood language that when consulting with vets or other equestrian professionals, they'll understand what you're saying. In closing, I'd just like to thank you all for taking some time to watch this. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to contact me at eholson, HOLSON, at uspolo.org, and I'm happy to talk with you about this more. So thank you guys. Have a nice day.